My name is Emma, I'm 28, and I found my fiancé kissing my own sister at our engagement party. Before I tell you how that single moment led to me getting a restraining order against her and exposing a multi-million-dollar corporate fraud, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. The clinking of champagne glasses felt like a countdown timer, ticking away the last few moments of a life I thought I wanted, a life I had worked so damn hard to believe in. Our engagement party was a perfect portrait of Zach's family's world, not mine. It was held at their sprawling country club, a place with manicured lawns so green they looked fake in air that smelled faintly of money and privilege. A jazz band, probably costing more per hour than I made in my first week of business, played softly in the corner, providing a smooth, unobtrusive soundtrack to the mingling of about 70 of their closest friends. I stood there in a silk dress the color of a pale blush rose, a dress that cost a staggering amount, a silent testament to the world I was marrying into. A polite, brittle smile was plastered on my face, and underneath it, I felt like a complete and utter imposter. Just moments before, Zach's father, Arthur Bennett, a man who moved with the chilling certainty of someone who had never been told no in his life, had introduced me to one of his golf buddies. "This is Emma, Zach's fiancée," he'd said, his voice smooth but dismissive. "She does interior decorating things." He'd punctuated the sentence with a vague, dismissive wave of his hand, as if my business, the one I had poured my blood, sweat, and every last cent of my savings into for 5 grueling years, was a cute little hobby, like knitting or collecting stamps. I was used to it, though. That was the sad part. I was used to being minimized, to having my accomplishments sanded down and made smaller to fit into other people's narratives. I was beginning to realize, the defining theme of my life. My sister, Lily, made her grand entrance an hour late, a classic Lily move designed to ensure all eyes were on her. And, of course, she was wearing a white dress. It was a slinky, backless number that was just a little too close to bridal for comfort. She burst into the room, making a beeline for the most crowded area, and immediately began a dramatic, tear-filled performance about her recent, very public breakup with her on-again, off-again boyfriend, Nathan. I watched her, a familiar, tight knot forming in the pit of my stomach. She had always possessed this uncanny ability to suck all the oxygen out of a room, to warp the gravity of any event so that it revolved entirely around her. Zach, my charming, handsome fiancé, the man who was supposed to be by my side, immediately rushed to hers. He wrapped a comforting arm around her shoulders, whispering something in her ear that made her laugh, a broken, watery sound through her crocodile tears. I took a slow sip of my champagne, the bubbles fizzing on my tongue, and told myself to stop it. To stop being the insecure, jealous older sister. That was the role my family had cast me in for years, and I was tired of playing the part. But throughout the evening, a persistent, nagging feeling of unease followed me like a shadow. I tried to shake it off, to engage in polite conversation about the stock market and summer homes in the Hamptons. Yet, my eyes kept finding them. I'd catch them across the room, sharing a look that lasted just a fraction of a second too long. A private smile would pass between them as they listened to someone else's story. A subtle nod that felt like a secret password. It was like they were communicating in a silent, invisible language, a language I wasn't privy to. About an hour later, as I was extricating myself from a conversation about the merits of different yacht clubs, I realized I hadn't seen Zach for a while. I did a quick scan of the room. He wasn't by the bar, or on the terrace overlooking the 18th hole. I checked my watch. It had been 20 minutes. A small prickle of unease started to crawl up my spine. I excused myself, murmuring something about needing some air, and began to look for him. I weaved through clusters of laughing guests, my eyes searching. I checked the main room, the patio, even the bar again. Nothing. One of Lily's friends, a girl with too much lip filler, pointed vaguely down a long hallway. I think I saw him heading that way, toward the coat check. The smooth jazz and the low hum of conversation faded behind me as I walked down the plushly carpeted hall. It was quieter here, the walls lined with oil paintings of stern-faced men who had probably been club presidents a century ago. I turned a corner into a small, dimly lit alcove where people had left their coats and wraps. And that's when my world, the carefully constructed, beautifully decorated world I thought I was building, stopped spinning. It didn't just stop. It shattered into a million, irreparable pieces. They were standing there, tucked away from view, partially hidden by a rack of expensive cashmere coats. Zach and Lily. His hand was splayed possessively on the small of her back, his fingers digging into the thin white fabric of her dress, pulling her flesh against him. And they were kissing. It wasn't a peck on the cheek. It wasn't a friendly, comforting gesture. It was a deep, hungry, lingering kiss, the kind shared between two people who knew the taste of each other intimately. My breath hitched in my throat, a sharp, painful sound. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. It felt as if my brain had short-circuited, the wires sparking and fizzling, unable to process the devastating scene unfolding in front of me. The man I was going to marry, the man who had held my hand just an hour ago, his eyes full of what I thought was love, and told me he couldn't wait to spend the rest of his life with me, was kissing my sister. My baby sister, the one I was always told to protect, to be the bigger person for. They didn't see me at first, lost in their own sordid little world. I just stood there, frozen in the doorway, feeling the blood drain from my face, a cold, creeping numbness spreading through my limbs. Then, Lily's eyes fluttered open, and she saw me over Zach's shoulder. She didn't look guilty. She didn't even look surprised. Her expression was one of pure, unadulterated annoyance. Annoyance that I had interrupted them. Zach pulled back slowly, a lazy smile on his lips, and followed her gaze. When he saw me, his face mirrored hers. Not shame, not regret, but irritation. He let out a long, theatrical, exasperated sigh, as if I was the one who had committed some unforgivable social faux pas. "Emma," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, as if speaking to a difficult child. "Don't make a scene." My own voice felt like it was trapped behind a wall of ice, 1,000 miles away. I finally managed to force out 2 words, my throat raw. "What is this?" He actually had the audacity to roll his eyes at me. At our engagement party. While his hand was still resting on my sister's back. "It was just a goodbye kiss, you insecure loser," he mocked, a cruel, ugly smirk twisting his handsome features. Lily, ever the supporting actress in his drama, chimed in, pulling a compact from her purse and fixing her lipstick as if we were discussing the weather. "God, Emma, we were just talking about old times. Don't be so dramatic." A goodbye kiss. The words echoed in the sudden, ringing silence of my mind. The shock was gone now, replaced by a horrifying, gut-wrenching clarity. A cold, sharp understanding that settled deep in my bones, chilling me from the inside out. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt nothing. A complete and total void where, just a moment ago, my future had been. It was a strange, out-of-body experience. I could feel my heart beating a slow, heavy rhythm in my chest, but the rest of me was numb. I just nodded once, a slow, deliberate movement that took every ounce of my self-control. Then I turned around and walked away. "Emma, don't you dare walk away from me." Zach called after me, his voice finally rising, laced with anger. "You are embarrassing me." But I didn't look back. I walked through the party, my eyes fixed straight ahead, a ghost moving through a celebration that was no longer mine. I was vaguely aware of the confused looks from the guests, the music that now sounded jarring and hollow. I grabbed my coat from the check, walked out into the cool night air, the breeze a slap against my numb skin, and got into my car. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely fit the key into the ignition. As I pulled out of the country club parking lot, my phone, sitting on the passenger seat, lit up and started buzzing incessantly. A text from Zach. Then another. Then a call. I didn't look. I just drove, my headlights cutting a lonely path through a darkness that suddenly felt like it was inside me, vast and suffocating. I was driving away from my life, and I had absolutely no idea where I was going. The drive to my friend Kai's apartment was a 20-minute journey that felt like an eternity. The city lights smeared past my windows in a meaningless blur. My mind, which had been so blessedly, terrifyingly blank just moments before, was now a chaotic storm of memories. Memories I had carefully packed away, labeled as misunderstandings or overreactions, were now bursting open, replaying in my mind with a sickening new clarity. It wasn't just about the kiss. The kiss was just the final, ugly punctuation mark on a story of betrayal that had been writing itself for years, and I had been too blind, or too willing to be blind, to read it. My thoughts immediately went to 6 months ago. The hotel contract. It was supposed to be my masterpiece, the project that would finally catapult my small firm into the major leagues. A luxury hotel chain was building their new flagship location, and I was one of the finalists to design the interior. It was the kind of career-defining opportunity that could secure my future, the kind of promotion and status that I had dreamed of. I had poured my heart and soul into that proposal. For weeks, my life was nothing but sketches, fabric swatches, and budget spreadsheets. My concept was ambitious, a fusion of sleek, modern minimalism with design elements inspired by local history. It was unique, and I knew it was a winner. One night, feeling giddy with excitement and a few glasses of wine, I had walked Zach through the entire presentation. I laid up my mood boards on the living room floor, showed him my detailed floor plans, even my confidential supplier lists and budget breakdowns. I wanted to share my triumph with him. He had seemed so genuinely supportive, his eyes wide with admiration. He called me a genius, his biggest fan, and kissed me with a passion that I mistook for pride. 2 weeks later, a cold, impersonal email informed me that I hadn't gotten the contract. I was devastated, but I tried to be professional. That's the nature of the business. The real blow came when I found out, through an industry acquaintance, that my sister, Lily, had one. I was floored. Her firm was a small, boutique operation, and she had never handled a project of that magnitude. When I finally managed to see a digital rendering of her winning proposal, my blood ran cold. It was mine. The core concept, the unique fusion of styles, even some of the specific, hard-to-source materials I had spent weeks finding, it was all there. It was my vision, my intellectual property, stolen and repackaged as her own. When I confronted her, she put on an Oscar-worthy performance. Tears streamed down her face as she swore it was a bizarre coincidence, that great minds simply think alike. She twisted it around, accusing me of being jealous, of never being able to stand seeing her succeed. And my parents, when I called them, heartbroken and looking for support, had delivered the same old, tired script. "Emma, you need to be the bigger person," my mother had said, her voice weary, as if my pain was an inconvenience to her. "You're already so successful. Let your sister have this moment." The truth, the real, ugly truth, came a week later. I was looking for a document on our shared home computer and stumbled upon an email in the sent folder of Zach's account. An email to Lily. He had forwarded her my entire, detailed proposal. Every page, every note, every number. The subject line was a punch to the gut, some ideas to help you get started. Don't tell E. When I confronted him with the proof, he crumbled. He swore it was a colossal, stupid mistake. He claimed he was just trying to help her, to give her a little boost because she was struggling. He said he never, ever thought she would plagiarize it so blatantly. He cried, he begged, he promised he would spend the rest of his life making it up to me, proving his loyalty. And because I loved him, because the thought of our life together was the only thing holding me together, I made the fatal mistake of forgiving him. I chose to believe the lie because the truth was too painful to bear. Now, driving through the dark city streets, that memory felt like a shard of glass twisting in my gut. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had actively, willingly participated in sabotaging my career for the benefit of my sister. And it was a pattern. I remembered being 17 when our grandmother passed away, leaving a small inheritance meant to be split evenly for our college funds. But my parents had sat me down for a serious talk. Lily, they explained, had been accepted into a prestigious, and very expensive, private art program. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. You're the practical one, Emma, my dad had said, patting my hand condescendingly. You're smart. You'll figure it out. You can get scholarships. And I did. I worked 2 jobs all through college, took out tens of thousands of dollars in student loans that I was still paying off, and graduated with honors. I figured it out. I was always the one who had to figure it out, while Lily's path was paved with the sacrifices I was forced to make. I finally pulled up to Kai's apartment building, my knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel. He opened the door on the first knock, his normally cheerful face instantly clouding over with concern. He didn't have to ask what was wrong. It must have been written all over my face, a roadmap of shock and devastation. I didn't say a word. I just collapsed into his arms, and for the first time that night, the cold, protective numbness shattered, and I started to sob, great, racking sobs that tore through my body. He led me inside, sat me down on his worn-out couch, and just let me talk. I told him everything, the whole ugly, sordid story, from the kiss in the alcove to the stolen hotel contract to a lifetime of being pushed aside and told to be the bigger person. He listened patiently, without interruption or judgment, just a quiet, simmering anger in his eyes on my behalf. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing on his coffee table, a relentless, angry insect. Dozens of texts and missed calls. Zach, where the hell did you go? Zach, answer your phone. You're being completely immature. Zach, my dad is asking where you went. You're making me look like an absolute idiot. Zach, OMG, you are embarrassing me so much right now. Get back here. Then there were the voicemails from Arthur. His voice was cold, clipped, and laced with menace. Emma, I don't know what kind of childish stunt you think you're pulling, but this is completely unacceptable behavior. We have guests who flew in for this event. You are making this family look foolish. Call me back immediately. Kai reached over, picked up the phone, and with a look of grim satisfaction, powered it off. You don't need to deal with that right now, he said gently. He made me a cup of chamomile tea and set up the spare bedroom for me with fresh sheets. As I lay in the dark, staring at the unfamiliar shadows on the ceiling, the tears finally stopped. The grief and the shock began to recede, burned away by something else. A cold, hard, unfamiliar anger. A clarity I hadn't felt in years. They had underestimated me my entire life. They saw me as the doormat, the peacekeeper, the one who would always absorb the blow and be the bigger person. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. I woke up the next morning to the gray light of dawn filtering through the blinds, feeling like I had been in a car crash. Every muscle in my body ached, and my head throbbed with a dull, persistent pain. But beneath the physical exhaustion, my mind was surprisingly, unnervingly clear. The chaotic storm of emotion from the night before had passed, leaving behind a cold, quiet landscape of resolve. The first thing I saw when I dared to turn my phone back on was a social media notification. Lily had posted. Of course she had. It was a picture of her from the party, artfully framed, looking beautiful and melancholic. The caption was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive manipulation. It was a long, rambling paragraph about how family drama had tragically ruined what should have been one of the happiest nights of her life. She wrote about how difficult it is when people you love are struggling with their own demons and how all you can do is send them love and pray they find their way back to the light. She didn't mention my name, but she didn't have to. The implication was clear. I was the one with the demons. I was the one who was lost. The comment section was already flooded with her sycophantic friends sending her heart emojis and messages of support, praising her for her strength and grace. She was already controlling the narrative, expertly painting me as the unstable, hysterical older sister who had a public meltdown. My blood, which had been running cold just hours before, began to boil. Then, as if on cue, my phone rang. The caller ID read Mom. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, a tiny, stupid flicker of hope igniting in my chest. Hope that she was calling to see if I was okay, to offer a word of comfort. That hope was extinguished the second I heard her voice. Emma, what on earth is wrong with you? She began, her voice sharp and accusatory. There was no hello, no how are you. Just the immediate, familiar sting of her disapproval. Your sister is an absolute mess. Zach is beside himself. You caused a terrible scene last night and humiliated this entire family. I was so stunned I couldn't speak for a moment. Mom, I finally managed, my voice barely a whisper. Did you even ask what happened? I caught him kissing her. At our engagement party. Oh, Emma, stop it, she sighed, a long, weary sound of pure exasperation that she had perfected over the years, the sound that always made me feel small and unreasonable. Lily explained everything to us. It was a meaningless, emotional moment. A mistake. You know how she gets after a breakup. For you to overreact like this, to run out and make such a spectacle of yourself, you need to call Zach and Lily and apologize to them immediately. That was it. That was the moment the last fragile thread of loyalty I had to my family finally snapped. This wasn't just about Zach and Lily anymore. It was about my own parents, who had spent a lifetime enabling my sister's destructive behavior and systematically invalidating my feelings. I was always the one who had to apologize, to smooth things over, to absorb the pain and be the bigger person. No, I said, and the voice that came out of me was one I didn't recognize. It was dangerously calm, devoid of any emotion. I will not be doing that. Don't you dare take that tone with me, young lady, she started, her voice rising in anger, but I just hung up the phone. The betrayal from my own mother, the casual, unthinking cruelty of her words, hurt more than the kiss itself. It was the final, brutal push I needed. I wasn't going to be their designated punching bag anymore. It was time to act. I scrolled through my contacts and called Mia, my best employee and a fiercely loyal friend. Mia, I need a huge favor. It's an emergency. And I'm going to need a truck. An hour later, she was outside Kai's apartment, her brother's pickup truck idling at the curb. She took one look at my face and simply said, "Tell me where we're going." We drove in silence to the home I had shared with Zach. I knew his schedule by heart, he'd be at his cushy office job for at least another 5 hours. Walking into that apartment felt like walking into a stranger's house. The life we had built there felt like a sham, a movie set. The framed photos of us on the walls, smiling on a hike, laughing at a wedding, seemed to mock me, relics from a life that had never really been mine. With a ruthless, methodical efficiency, Mia and I began to dismantle that life. I was a surgeon, excising my presence from the space. I only took what was unequivocally mine, what I had paid for with my own money, and the few sentimental items that predated him. My clothes, my books, the antique drafting table I'd inherited from my grandfather, which had been my most prized possession. Mia was a whirlwind of quiet, focused support, never asking questions, just efficiently packing boxes and loading them into the truck. She seemed to understand that this wasn't a time for words. It was a time for action. In just over 2 hours, we had loaded everything essential into her truck and my car. The apartment looked strangely empty, hollowed out. Before I left for the final time, I walked into the kitchen. Zach's grandmother's engagement ring, a ridiculously large diamond that had always felt more like a prop than a promise, was still on my finger. I twisted it off. It felt heavy and cold, a perfect circle of lies. I placed it squarely in the middle of the polished granite island, a glittering monument to our failed relationship. Then, I took a piece of paper from the notepad by the phone and, with a steady hand, wrote 2 words on it. Goodbye kiss. I left the note propped up against the ring. As I walked out of that apartment and closed the door behind me, a profound, unexpected sense of relief washed over me. It was done. I pulled out my phone and did something I should have done years ago. I blocked Zach's number. I blocked Lily's. Then, with a deep breath, I blocked my parents. The lines of communication were severed. They couldn't reach me anymore. The storm was coming, I knew, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I was the one in control. I wasn't just running away from a fire. I was getting ready to burn it all down. The first few days in my new, temporary life were a strange mixture of logistical chaos and quiet, simmering fury. I moved my boxes into a short-term rental apartment I found online, a small, anonymous one-bedroom in a part of town I never frequented. It was sparse and impersonal, with a mattress on the floor and my clothes still in boxes, but it was mine. It was a fortress. It was safe. The silence from my phone was a blessed relief, but I knew it was just the eye of the storm. A family like mine, obsessed with appearances and control, wouldn't just let me disappear. They would find other ways to get to me. I was right. Late one evening, a few days after my escape, I got a message request on social media from a name I didn't recognize. "Hi, Emma. This is Nathan. Lily's ex. I saw her post. It's all BS. I think you and I need to talk." My heart hammered against my ribs. I had no idea what he wanted, but a powerful, gut instinct told me this was important. We agreed to meet for coffee the next day at a small, out-of-the-way cafe. Nathan looked even worse in person than he did in his profile picture. He was pale and exhausted, with dark circles under his eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. He kept running a hand through his messy hair, a nervous tic. He got straight to the point. "Look, I'm not here to cause more drama," he said, his voice low and intense. "I'm here because I got screwed over, and I'm pretty sure you did too. Lily and I didn't just break up. I found out she's been cheating on me for months, with Zach." He slid his phone across the worn wooden table. "And it wasn't just cheating," he continued, his voice hardening. "They were planning something. They were using us." My hand was trembling slightly as I picked up the phone. He had screenshots. Dozens and dozens of them, a meticulous archive of their deception. Months and months of messages between Lily and Zach. My stomach churned with a nauseous mixture of vindication and disgust as I scrolled. There were hotel receipts booked under Zach's corporate card. Flirtatious, coded texts about their meetings. Explicit photos that made me feel physically ill. But the worst part, the part that felt like a physical blow, was a conversation from about 7 months ago, right before I had started working on the hotel proposal. Lily, her new project could be huge. The connections she'll make, that's the kind of client base I need. Zach, I know. She trusts me. I'll get all the details for you. Consider it a down payment on our future. Lily, once Emma's business connections help me establish my design firm, we can figure us out. Ditch the losers and start for real. There it was. In black and white. Irrefutable proof. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. It was a cold, calculated, long-term plan. They had been using me. My talent, my hard work, my connections. I was just a pawn in their twisted game, a stepping stone for them to build their future together on the wreckage of mine. The grief I had been feeling was completely incinerated, burned away by a white-hot, purifying rage. Nathan then told me the final, sordid piece of the puzzle. It wasn't just your hotel contract, Emma. A few months ago, I loaned her and Zach $5,000. They told me it was seed money for a side business they were starting, some tech venture. They promised a huge return. I was an idiot. I see now it was probably for one of their little hotel getaways. They scammed me. He had been used, cheated on, and scammed. His desire for revenge was a palpable thing. He forwarded all the evidence, the screenshots, the receipts, everything, to my email. "Do what you want with it," he said, his eyes hard and unforgiving. "They deserve whatever's coming to them." I walked out of that coffee shop with a weapon. A meticulously documented dossier of their deception. That night, as if the universe was determined to test my newfound resolve, a friend forwarded me an invite. The header was bright and cheerful, in a bubbly, obnoxious font, "Celebrate Freedom with Zach and Lily." It was an invitation to a party that coming weekend at a trendy new downtown club. The picture on the invitation was of the two of them, taken just days before, smiling into the camera, looking deliriously happy and in love. The caption read, "Finally free and living our best lives." A freedom party. They weren't just moving on. They were celebrating my pain. They were throwing a party on the grave of our relationship and inviting all our friends to dance on it. Without a moment's hesitation, I opened my email. I attached Nathan's entire dossier of evidence, every screenshot, every receipt. Then I forwarded the invite, with the damning attachment, to one person, Arthur Bennett. I didn't add a subject or a message. I just sent it. Let him see what his precious son was really up to. Let him see the scandal they were so proudly, so stupidly, flaunting. I didn't know it then, but that single, strategic email would set in motion a chain of events that would bring their entire, gilded world crashing down. 2 days after I sent that fateful invite, my doorbell rang. It was late, almost 9 p.m., and the unexpected sound made me jump. I wasn't expecting anyone. I crept to the door and peered through the peephole, and my blood ran cold. It was Arthur Bennett. He was standing in the hallway of my nondescript apartment building, looking utterly, dangerously out of place. How had he found me? The question barely had time to form before the chilling answer hit me. Of course he found me. A man like him, with his money, his connections, his complete disregard for boundaries, could find anyone. He probably had a private investigator on retainer for just such occasions. I took a deep, steadying breath, unlocked the deadbolt, and opened the door, but I blocked the entrance with my body. "Emma," he said, his voice as smooth and polished as the Italian leather of his shoes, but his eyes were like chips of ice. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Don't be difficult," he replied, a flicker of impatience in his eyes. "Let me in." It wasn't a request, it was a command. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. He swept into my small, sparse apartment, his expensive suit and cologne an assault on the senses. He surveyed the room, with my mattress on the floor and my life in cardboard boxes, with a look of undisguised contempt. "This is a temporary situation, I assume," he said, perching gingerly on the edge of a metal folding chair as if it might collapse under his wealth. "What do you want, Arthur?" I asked, crossing my arms, refusing to be intimidated. He steepled his fingers, the picture of a man in control. "This engagement needs to be back on. This little spat has gone on long enough. It's becoming embarrassing for the family." I actually laughed. A short, bitter, humorless sound. "A little spat? Your son was cheating on me with my sister for months, Arthur. They conspired to steal a major business contract from me. The engagement is over. The wedding is off. There is nothing to discuss about a potential divorce because there will be no marriage." His cold expression didn't change. "Everything in life is negotiable, Emma. I understand your business is still growing," he said, the word dripping with condescension. "It must be difficult to land the kind of high-end, corporate clients that really pay the bills. The kind of clients that lead to a real salary. I could help with that. I know people. A few phone calls, and your promotion from a small-time decorator to a sought-after designer could be a reality. I can make you very successful." It was a bribe. A blatant, insulting bribe. He was trying to buy my silence, to buy my compliance, to bribe me to take back his cheating, manipulative son, all to avoid a public scandal. "My integrity isn't for sale, Arthur," I said, my voice like ice. And that's when the mask slipped. The smooth, corporate facade vanished, replaced by a raw, ugly menace. "You need to think very carefully about your next move," he said, his voice dropping to a low, dangerous snarl. "Your primary supplier for your solar panel installations, a company called SunSource. A fine company. Their primary line of credit, the financing that allows them to give you such favorable payment terms, comes through a subsidiary of my firm. It would be a terrible shame if their credit line suddenly became problematic. A single word from me, and you could be out of business in a month. It was a direct, brutal threat. He was threatening my livelihood, everything I had worked for, my employees' jobs, because his son couldn't keep it in his pants. But something about his desperation, the sheer extremity of his threat, struck me as odd. This wasn't just about saving his son from public embarrassment. This was about something bigger. He wasn't just angry. He was scared. As soon as he left, a cold dread mixed with a surge of adrenaline, I called Kai. "I need you to do some digging," I said, my voice urgent. "I need you to find out everything you can about Bennett Financial. Anything unusual, any rumors, any trouble. I don't care how you do it." What Kai found 2 days later was the key that unlocked everything. It wasn't just a rumor. Bennett Financial was under a quiet, but very serious, investigation by state regulators for compliance issues and the mishandling of client retirement funds. Several of their major institutional clients were already discreetly pulling their money. Arthur wasn't trying to save a wedding, he was desperately trying to save his crumbling empire. A messy, public scandal involving his son and heir apparent right now would be a PR nightmare, a signal of profound instability to the rest of his nervous clients and, more importantly, to the regulators. He was desperate to project an image of a perfect, stable, powerful family. And in that moment, I realized I had him. He thought he held all the cards, that he could bully me into submission. But I was holding the ace. That Saturday was the night of the now infamous Freedom Party. I obviously didn't go. I spent the evening at home, trying to distract myself with work, a knot of nervous energy twisting in my stomach. Around 11 p.m., my phone started lighting up like a Christmas tree. It was a group chat with a few mutual friends. Then came the videos. Apparently, Arthur had shown up. The first video was shaky, filmed on a cell phone from across the crowded, pulsing room. It showed Arthur Bennett, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit, marching onto the dance floor where Zach and Lily were laughing and taking a selfie. He wasn't yelling. He was terrifyingly, unnervingly calm. I watched, my breath held, as he stood before them. He didn't raise his voice. He spoke in a low, chilling tone that seemed to cut through the thumping bass of the music. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the color drain from Zach's face. Lily's vapid smile froze and then crumbled into a mask of confusion and fear. Then a second, much clearer video came through. This one was filmed from just a few feet away. The audio was crystal clear. "A worthless parasite," Arthur was saying to Zach, his voice devoid of any fatherly affection. It was the voice of a CEO addressing a failed investment. "You are a liability I can no longer afford." He then turned his cold, dead eyes on Lily. "And you," he said, his voice dripping with contempt, "a classless, opportunistic homewrecker. You have both made a mockery of this family's name, a name I have spent my entire life building." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his wallet. "Your credit cards, which are tied to the corporate account, have been cancelled," he said to Zach. He then produced a small, elegant pair of silver scissors from another pocket and, with a theatrical snip, cut Zach's platinum Amex in half. The crowd gasped. "Your allowance is cut off, effective immediately. The keys to the condo, which is owned by the company, need to be on my desk Monday morning by 9 a.m. You're fired. Get out of my sight." It wasn't a father's emotional outburst. It was a corporate execution. A ruthless CEO cutting a toxic asset loose in the most public way imaginable. He was publicly severing ties with his own son to signal to the world, and more importantly, to his clients and the regulators, that he was cleaning house, that he was a man of decisive, if brutal, action. The entire room was silent, save for the music that the DJ had awkwardly faded out. Dozens of phones were held up, recording the cold, calculated destruction of his son's life. Zach and Lily just stood there, paralyzed, humiliated, as Arthur turned on his heel and walked out of the party without a single backward glance. The fallout was immediate, spectacular, and deeply satisfying. The videos went viral in our social circles overnight. Zach and Lily became the stuff of local legend, a cautionary tale whispered about at brunch tables and in corporate boardrooms. Stripped of his father's money, name, and influence, Zach was nothing. A hollow man with a handsome face and no substance. Their so-called friends, who had been drawn to their glittering lifestyle, abandoned them as quickly as they had flocked to them. According to the gossip mill, which was working overtime, they were constantly fighting, their toxic romance curdling into bitter resentment, each blaming the other for their spectacular fall from grace. But Lily, I soon discovered, was not one to go down without a fight. Her desperation made her even more dangerous. She started a vicious, targeted smear campaign against my business. She created fake online profiles and left scathing one-star reviews, filled with lies about me stealing designs, using cheap, substandard materials, and missing deadlines. She even started contacting some of my current clients directly, feeding them a venomous narrative about my supposed instability. It was a nuisance, a stressful and time-consuming fire to put out, but my reputation in the industry was solid, and my clients, thankfully, trusted me more than they trusted a desperate, anonymous online troll. The final, ugly confrontation came a week later. I was leaving my apartment building, heading to a client meeting, when she ambushed me in the lobby. She was a mess. Her usually perfect hair was unkempt, her expensive clothes were wrinkled, and her eyes had a wild, unhinged look. She started screaming at me the second she saw me, her voice echoing off the polished marble walls. "You did this to me," she shrieked, her voice cracking with a rage that was terrifying to behold. "You ruined my life. You were always jealous of me. You couldn't stand to see me happy with Zach." She lunged at me, and for a terrifying second, I thought she was going to physically attack me. The doorman, a large, kind man named George, quickly stepped between us, but she kept screaming, a torrent of vile, hateful insults that made my blood run cold. That's when I knew I had to end this, not just for my peace of mind, but for my own safety. The next day, I hired a lawyer. With the crystal-clear security camera footage from my lobby, the dozens of harassing text messages she had sent from burner phones, and the documented proof of her online smear campaign, getting a restraining order was a straightforward, albeit unpleasant, process. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with tired eyes, reviewed the evidence and granted it without hesitation. Standing in that cold, sterile courtroom, watching my own sister be legally ordered to stay at least 500 feet away from me, felt surreal. It was a painful, ugly, tragic end to what was left of our sisterhood, but it was also a necessary one. I was finally, truly, drawing a line in the sand. I was choosing my own peace, my own sanity, my own safety, over the toxic, chaotic vortex of her life. The legal document felt less like a weapon and more like a shield. It was the ultimate boundary, a final, non-negotiable declaration that I would no longer allow her, or anyone, to destroy my life. The war was finally over. A few months passed. The noise, the drama, the endless gossip, finally died down. Life settled into a new, quieter rhythm. Zach and Lily, stripped of their resources and their social standing, reportedly moved into a small, run-down apartment on the other side of town, their great love story apparently souring quickly under the harsh glare of reality and financial hardship. Then, the news I had been half expecting finally broke. Bennett Financial, unable to stop the bleeding from the regulatory investigation and the mass exodus of clients, formally declared bankruptcy. Arthur lost everything. He had ruthlessly sacrificed his son in a desperate bid to save his empire, and in the end, he lost that too. There was a certain grim, poetic justice to it all. One afternoon, there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it to find my parents standing there on my doorstep. They looked older, smaller, diminished somehow by the weight of the past few months. They offered a clumsy, rambling, self-serving apology, full of excuses and justifications. "We just never knew how to handle Lily," my mother said, tears welling up in her eyes. She was always so fragile. We just thought, maybe if you gave in, if you were the bigger person, things would finally be peaceful. I listened patiently, without interruption. I saw their regret, but I also saw the deep, ingrained patterns of a lifetime of enabling and avoidance. I didn't yell. I didn't dredge up the past. I just said, calmly and firmly, I appreciate you coming here. But I need space to heal from all of this. I can't have you in my life right now. Closing the door on my own parents was one of the hardest, most painful things I have ever had to do. But it was also one of the most liberating. I was no longer responsible for their comfort, for managing their flawed and broken family dynamics. I was only responsible for myself. My business, ironically, was thriving. The story of what had happened, in a strange and unexpected way, had become a testament to my character. It had spread through the tight-knit design and construction community. People respected that I had stood up for myself, that I had refused to be bullied. New clients called, not just because they liked my portfolio, but because they said they were impressed by my integrity. Then, one day, I got a call that made my heart stop. It was the CEO of the luxury hotel chain, the very one I had lost the contract to all those months ago. Ms. Evans, he said, his voice warm and deeply professional. I believe I owe you a sincere apology. We were recently made aware of the unethical circumstances surrounding your original proposal for our downtown project. What Ms. Bennett did was a serious breach of professional conduct, and we have terminated our contract with her. Frankly, he added, with a sigh, her work was subpar anyway, and she was a nightmare to work with. He paused, and I held my breath. I was, and still am, incredibly impressed with your original vision. And with your character. As it happens, we are starting a new, even larger resort project on the coast. I want you to be the lead designer. The project is yours, if you want it. I was speechless. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes. It was more than just a job. It was validation. It was justice. It was a chance to reclaim what had been stolen from me, and then some. Yes, I said, my voice thick with emotion but steady. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. The lead architect on the new coastal resort project was a man named Echo. He was brilliant, with a quiet confidence and a passion for his work that was infectious. He treated me as an equal, a true collaborator, from our very first meeting. There was an easy chemistry between us, a shared respect for our craft and, I soon discovered, for each other. We started with business lunches to discuss blueprints, which soon turned into long dinners, talking about everything and nothing. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, born of drama and intensity. It was something better. Something quiet, and steady, and real. Tonight, I'm sitting in my new office, a beautiful, light-filled space with a view that overlooks the entire city. The lights twinkle below me like a sea of fallen stars. In front of me, spread out on my grandfather's antique drafting table, are the preliminary sketches for the coastal resort project. My designs. My vision. I think about the past year, the absolute hellfire I had to walk through to get here. The kiss at that party wasn't the end of my life. It was the beginning. It was the violent, painful, necessary catalyst that forced me to burn down a life that was built on a foundation of lies, and to build a new one from the ashes, a life that is truly and completely my own. I'm not just a survivor. I am the architect of my own happiness. And the future, for the first time in a very long time, looks beautiful. Thanks so much for listening to my story. It's been a wild ride, and sharing it helps. I have a question for all of you watching. Have you ever had to cut off a toxic family member to find your own peace? Let me know your experiences in the comments below. It helps to know we're not alone. And if you found my story helpful, please give this video a like and subscribe for more. It really means a lot.